From Alameda, California, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Flying High Over the Zone with the Zigzag Man.
I am back, and you are flying high over the zone with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, in the northern part of what I think is the greatest state ever, except maybe New York, where I was born and raised. But for a lot of reasons, I'm the guy who stayed out in California to live his life after he got out of the Air Force. So I guess I am running towards, and that's 50 years ago, I'm running towards being a lifer in California and loving it. And as is my wont, I get to talk to interesting people. Today is no exception. Everybody knows I'm a big baseball fan, and I'm also a humanist, and I was attracted to Michael Duca as a guest because he gave a wonderful essay on Facebook about losing an acquaintance in the press box. He's an official scorer, and he's out in California, in the northern part. He's out at Candlestick most days or nights whenever there's a game. And a friend of the show, a fellow by the name of Purdy, is retiring from being a sports writer. Michael Duca, tell me about your relationship with a fellow who I think is one of the most interesting guys around, San Jose Mercury News. Tell me about him. Tell me about you. What inspired the beautifully written essay that really caught my attention?
Well, first of all, thank you for that, Ralph. I'm going to do the one thing that a guest should never, ever do to open up a segment, which is correct the host. I don't spend any time out of Candlestick anymore. It's just too depressing. There's nothing but a pile of concrete shreds there now. But I do spend a lot of time
yes.
at AT&T Park.
The Candlestick is much nicer now than it used to be. Now that it's gone. But we both have memories of Candlestick, I'm sure. AT&T Park. What a gem. Whoa.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I saw the field there. I remember that on the first opening day, I got out of the press box and went and stood right next to the top of the escalator so that I could see people's expressions the first time that absolute emerald gem opened up in front of their view, and it was a memorable thing. But the question you asked was about Mark Purdy.
Mark.
And I've known Mark for many, many years. I remember when Mark was introduced to the Bay Area. He had been a columnist, if memory serves correctly, for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And I think Mark has a degree from Ohio University, if I'm not mistaken. And when he first came out, he had some of those peculiar points of view that people do have in the Midwest, that it took him about a year to adjust to being a coastal person, and then he really got into the swing of things. He's been an ardent booster of San Jose and the South Bay in general since the day he landed on our shores. He and I had great disagreements over whether the territory belonged to the Giants, even bigger disagreements over what the A's would call themselves when they moved there, but we always had nothing but agreements on the fact that the Sharks were close but not close enough.
Michael, could you tell us and refresh my memory how the territorial rights, and I put that in quotes, and you didn't see it, but I put my little quotey thing up there, came to be? Was it a payoff? Was it a reward? How did that come to be? And is it real? And is it only enforced? Is it only as real as the enforcement of it? give me some idea how that probably ended up saving the A's for Oakland. Now that all the other teams are gone, I'm sure they're going to put a concerted effort into a ballpark if they haven't already begun doing that. What was the trip on that, Michael?
Well, it was really very simple. The Giants were in danger of leaving in the early 90s. The city of Tampa Bay had been basically told that they were getting the Giants. Interesting side note that nobody seems to remember is that the public information officer for that effort in Tampa Bay was a fellow by the name of Bob Rose, who had worked for USFL teams and done some other sports-related PR work before he actually came out to California and became the media relations director for the Giants and then for Cal and then for the Oakland A's. So Bob probably can tell you more about that than anyone I know. However, what I do know is that Walter Haas, who purchased the Oakland Athletics as a civic philanthropy almost, believed that it was important for both teams to stay in the Bay Area. And so he ceded, that's with a C, ceded the territory in the South Bay to the Giants because there was a point at which it looked like the Giants may have to look at moving to San Jose themselves because a couple of ballot propositions to build first a dome stadium and then a regular stadium in San Francisco had failed. Those were under Mayor Dianne Feinstein at the time. So the Haas ownership granted that territory to the Giants. There was no consideration exchanged. It was done as a, as a kind of a civic joy, if you will. Where things get complicated is in the fact that once the Giants built their new stadium with private funding, which, by the way, means they went to the bank and borrowed money.
You don't see that very often.
No. In order to retain that loan, it's not, you don't get a mortgage on a ballpark. You get a business loan. And a business loan has to be renewed, usually annually. The terms may change a little bit, but most important of all, you have to go in each year and present a business plan that shows that you are still creditworthy within this institution and that it will produce enough cash flow to service the loan. And the Giants' business plans always included Silicon Valley as part of their home territory, both as a fan base and as a base for corporate sponsorships and possible naming rights, et cetera, et cetera. So then things got really kind of mixed up because you had the A's sold to the Steve Schott Group at below market value in order to keep them in Oakland. And then they were resold to the current ownership. Meanwhile, the Giants were sold from the Lurie ownership to the McGowan ownership. And so you had a whole bunch of sales that involved that territory as being part of the value of the franchise. So if it had come to pass, and it obviously never did, that the A's were to somehow reacquire that territory, it would also have necessitated unraveling 3 sales and repricing them and going back and redoing everything with what was originally Citizens Bank that is now Bank of America for the Giants. Of course, the Giants just finished paying off their park in December, so that particular portion of this little saga is over. And apparently the A's' attempts to move to the South Bay are also. One of the ways that Mark Purdy and I used to vastly disagree was that I told him that I didn't think the A's would succeed if they moved down there.
Whoa. I would have to agree with Mark Purdy. I mean, that there's so much buzz, so many corporate dollars down there.
There are corporate dollars, but this is a touchy subject to bring up. You have to speak about it very carefully. But if you look at the demographics of Silicon Valley, and particularly the demographics of the middle and upper middle income earners who are going to go to ball games.
A lot of Spanish, a lot of, am I right?
A lot of people come from a part of the world that have no baseball tradition. They come from Southern Asia, Southeast Asia, India, China. No baseball tradition there. And so it becomes...
Well, that's what kept the Giants from having... Well, that's what necessitated the Giants building their own park. It came up for vote in San Francisco, and San Francisco has basically the same demographics in terms of folks. Why do you think it would make a difference down there? And how much of all of baseball fandom has the people are gone from the stand? It's a corporate world. They give out tickets as perks for clients, this and that. You got the corporate boxes. I don't understand your point of view how it would be that much different than in San Francisco, or in Oakland rather, for the A's down there.
Well, first off, you've got an American League team moving into an area that has traditionally seen itself as Giants territory at least as long as I can recall, which goes back to 1960. Second of all, you have a confluence of transit options that terminate in San Francisco and almost none that terminate in San Jose. You're looking at an area that is already grotesquely congested with traffic just due to commuting, where people are getting into fistfights over whether or not buses should be allowed to go 45 miles to pick people up in San Francisco and take them down to San Jose. Those folks who commute to San Jose are probably not in the pool of potential customers for a baseball stadium. And, the large number of folks of, whether we're talking about, the largest Afghan community outside of Afghanistan, which is in Fremont, or one of the largest Sikh and East Indian communities outside of Asia, which is in Santa Clara County. These are people who don't have a baseball tradition in. So it becomes a whole different marketing exercise to try and get them to show up at a ball game. While you do have a lot of Asians in San Francisco and a lot of non-traditional baseball fans, if you will, they are, for the most part, second and third generation now. And so they do have at least the baseball tradition of having grown up in a town that has a team. I'm not sure how many software engineers go out and watch the San Jose Giants just to go to Turkey Mike's barbecue.
Right. Although I highly recommend that. That is a terrific experience. A-ball is terrific. The California League is terrific. Those people are missing out. But yes, I see your point. They're coming up to San Francisco rather than staying in San Jose watching A-ball. Are you happy the way things turned out in terms of the A's going to stay here too? Do you believe it's a two-team market?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
If you go back and look, go all the way back to 1989, if I'm not mistaken, the two teams drew close to 6 million people. All that is required for the A's to draw well is for the A's to play well. The fan base is there.
Well, sometimes it has to be which comes first, the chicken or the egg, because to draw. It's the ballpark too that attracts people, and the revenues from the ballpark enables a team, provided they put the money back into the ballpark, into the ball team, to become good. So, sometimes it's hard to tell what's wagging the dog, or the tail of the dog.
Well, I would take this position. When you don't do well, you get high draft picks. The
Right.
amount of money that your franchise is making does not have a whole lot to do with how effective your scouts are in identifying talent. And I don't think anybody can take the position that the A's has failed at identifying young talent. The league is full of their young talent.
The amount of money that Bean has to work with, he's done an incredible job. But let me address the draft thing. There's something called signability. You may get a high draft choice, but because of your decision not to put those bucks that you've been getting from Major League Baseball to subsidize you all these years, and if you didn't want to put the bucks into it, you just draft a guy who you can agree to sign before the draft at a lower price. So teams can not get better. Now, I'm not saying Bean does that, but it's certainly an option. And that funding that Major League Baseball has given to, quote, small market teams, and not the A's. The A's didn't get it because of that. They get it because of the dilapidated condition that the Coliseum is in. So they get a part of the luxury tax. Teams like the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies, whoever puts a lot of bucks, more so than they're allotted, they have to pay into payroll. They have to pay the smaller teams compensation for that. Now, how is it working? You tell me, how does that system work? I mean, I know how the system works, but is it helping or is it hurting ball? Good for ball.
There's a lot of sophisticated issues that go into this. I mean, you also have to take into account the international signing situation, which is becoming more and more regulated. You have a team like the Giants who exceeded the luxury tax threshold 2 years in a row and therefore lost international signing rights in the future draft. So there are ways they are.
I didn't know about that. That's kind of a stiff penalty given the talent pool in the world that we're dealing with. If you look at a major league roster, it's anywhere from 7 to 12 players are of Latin descent. So that's a hell of a penalty to lose an entire.
And the world is getting bigger than the Caribbean now too. I mean, you are seeing there's quite a few players coming in from Australia. We are now beginning to see outcomes from Major League Baseball's strenuous efforts over the last 20 years to develop baseball in Europe. There are players from Germany and Italy who are being drafted and brought up through organizations. So I think on the one side that is working. The other thing that you have to know about is that there are, much like it is with the NBA now, there are slots. If you draft number one, if you're the A's and you have the number one pick in the draft, unlike the NBA, you can't really trade it away. You have to pick somebody there. And so if you don't want to spend what that slot requires, which this year I think was about $6 million for a number one pick, then the only thing you really can do is go out and draft somebody you know won't sign. You're not allowed to pass your pick. And if you can't afford to spend the money on your pick, or you choose to not to because you don't think there's anybody out there worth that kind of signing bonus, then then your only way to the system is to draft somebody who's highly committed to Cal State Fullerton already.
Right. And that college ball does compete with Major League Ball. Here's an interesting thing, off the topic a little bit. So you mentioned college ball, and I would say that top-notch school like Cal, Stanford, they're playing against A-ball talent easily. It's a minor league in itself. And I'm wondering, and I've talked to several different scouts about this, it is virtually impossible to judge a hitter, how a hitter will hit with a wooden bat when these aluminum bats are used in college. Why isn't it? Because colleges have become such a minor league for the big leagues, for Major League Baseball. Why doesn't Major League Baseball invest in buying some bats? I mean, because allegedly the reason they're aluminum bats is that the expense for the colleges to buy the bats, this, that, and the other thing. Why doesn't Major League Baseball subsidize a cash cow by buying wooden bats and distributing them amongst the college teams? Just off the top of my head, that's my question for you, Michael. Michael? Oh, okay.
I am back. I'm so sorry. Technology bit us, and the battery on my phone died spontaneously.
Oh, okay.
So where I left you were asking me about Cal and Stanford being A-ball equivalent.
Yes, and with that said, they have become a minor league. College baseball has become a minor league for the major leagues, for big leagues. Why don't they go out and buy some wooden bats to make it easy for the scouts to determine whether or not a hitter can hit? Because if you're fooled, you hit it off don't hit it on the sweet spot. With an aluminum bat, you could still hit it double down the line. So my thinking was, just off the top of my head, I think Major League Ball should subsidize the colleges by buying wooden bats and make it even. Eventually, you get a better product on the field for the fan. You get the people who are best evaluated and all that, more easily evaluated.
Would it surprise you to know that I've had that? No, we didn't discuss that, but Brian Sabian and I have discussed that.
Really? Oh, wow.
Absolutely. I had the same idea 20 years ago. But here's where things get sticky.
Okay.
First of all, you have public schools, you have private schools, you have schools that have sponsorships, schools that already make money from their relationships with companies that supply equipment. When you start talking about a 65-game college season and 15 to 17 serious hitters on a squad, you're talking about 5,000 or 6,000 wooden bats over the course of a season. And 5,000 or 6,000 wooden bats at $60 a piece gets pricey, especially when you multiply that by over 800 schools that play college baseball in this country at all levels, Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college, et cetera, et cetera. That's part A. Part
Besides
B
high schools,
is,
too. Not just that. They get prospects out of high schools, too. So
yes.
It would make it virtually possible.
And then you may move to part B, which is, while you may think of college as another minor league level, the baseball teams will be very quick to point out to you that they don't own the players, they don't control the players. Why should they supply equipment to improve the ability of players that will play against them at the major league level? And more important than any of those is the whole notion of how you maintain some level of control over a coaching staff. And I'm going to, again, tread very carefully here and go into the Wayback Machine a little bit here and remind people of coaches like Cliff Gustafson at Texas, who was a very highly regarded coach, who turned out literally dozens of major league arm prospects and who maybe turned out 5 or 6 guys who actually pitched in the major leagues. I mean, his most notable success, of course, was Roger Clemens, but there were just people like Kirk Dressendorfer come to mind, and others who just they came through that
system. Years, one of the aces, the 4 aces, Dressendorfer.
And what happened to those guys is that they got beat to death in college ball. They would throw 200 or more innings in college.
Wow.
Throw once a week for 20 weeks, and they would throw, 7, 8, 9 innings, and then you get into tournaments, and they might pitch 2 or 3 times in a week. And they just, there's too much information. There's too many studies that are showing that if you want an arm to last a long time, that you don't put an adult strain level on it until the shoulder capsule has fully knitted into its final adult shape, which is around 21 or 22 years of age. The most interesting case study of this is to go back and look at Nolan Ryan's career. Ryan pitched until he was 45, pitched effectively until he was 45, but he didn't pitch at all when he was 20 because he was too wild. If you look at his early years in the major leagues, he pitched like 83 innings one year, and I think 110 the next. It took him quite a while to develop a relationship with home plate. And once he did, then he was able to give you 220, 230 innings a year in and year out, almost never got hurt, almost never missed a start, but it was because his arm was allowed to mature before it was asked to take on a mature workload.
Right. Brings us to the point of injuries that are so epidemic to pitching all over baseball. Is it that they're trying to throw beyond their capability, miles per hour? It's up on the board. They want to break 95, then they want to break 100, and they put too much. Could it be that just doing that, and instead of having a 90-mile-an-hour fastball and an off-speed pitch of 70, they're trying for a 100-mile-an-hour fastball and disregarding the effectiveness of the off-speed pitch. And do you think that's what's contributing to the injuries?
I think a couple of things are contributing to injuries. I think that the 2 things that have the most contribution to pitching arm injuries are mom and dad. I think kids are being encouraged to go out and
the AAU teams and the traveling teams and this, that, and the other thing.
All of that coupled with the fact that I defy you to go out and find a 12 or 13-year-old traveling squad where pitchers aren't throwing 30 to 50 breaking balls a game. You cannot let a 12-year-old arm throw a breaking ball. You shouldn't teach it. You shouldn't allow it. There is simply no way that a 12-year-old elbow can stand up to that torque. They won't, they can't, and they blow out. You see kids in high school having Tommy John surgery. Even more insidious than that, I love pointing out hypocrisy wherever it shows up, Ralph, and one of my favorite places is the people who stand there and stamp their feet about you can't count any stats from the steroid era. The steroid era was cheating. People shouldn't be allowed to enhance themselves like that. And, oh, by the way, I have to excuse myself now. My son is having voluntary prophylactic
elective surgery. You're going to cut into your kid on the idea that, first of all, the rehab is absolutely incredibly painful, incredibly arduous, with the idea that he may or may not come back stronger. I mean, they do it electively because it miraculously, the operation itself sometimes tightens things up with they can throw faster when they after they're done. But is this? I mean, would you do that to your child? He says, son, I know we promised you a tonsillitis where you get ice cream, but you know this thing is going to bring us all big bucks, and you're going to, and it puts the priority of money into the kid's idea, the head where the world is based on money. That is you hit that right on the head, Michael. That's absolutely craziness in this world. It speaks to society's greed and the state of things in the world. But that's a biggie. You can't get by that. Elective surgery for my child who's 12. Great.
Right, and the reason it's done this way now is that what they're doing now, instead of, originally Tommy John surgery involved going in and stripping a piece of tendon out of one's leg. You would see the guys with Tommy John surgery would always show you the scar on their thigh first. And they would take that and use it to reattach the detached tendon from the elbow. Well, now they go in and they use tendons from cadavers, which are a little bit stronger, and they fold them over in half and then take that doubled tendon and wrap it around the end of the new tendon and put the screw through it. So you've got the new tendon 4 thicknesses, wrapping the existing living tendon, which makes that attachment nearly impossible to tear again. Not totally impossible. People like Brian Wilson have managed to do it. And I'm going to go a step further and make a really heretical statement here and tell you that if you see somebody who has 2 Tommy John surgeries in their career, you are looking at someone who is absolutely uncoachable, because you do not undergo Tommy John surgery unless you have a mechanical flaw. And if you undergo it a second time, it's because the mechanical flaw is in your brain.
Wow. That's you couldn't adapt your emotion to not get hurt the second time. So,
unwilling to. I mean, and examples of this abide. Zach Wheeler with the Mets. Giants had him in their organization, traded him for a couple of months of Carlos Beltran. The very first thing that Zach Wheeler said when he was traded, he was informed by a reporter that he'd been traded to the Mets, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Good, I can go back to my high school pitching motion." Giants had told him, "Your arm's going to fall off if you keep throwing like that." So they taught him a new motion, which got him the success that allowed the Mets to want him. He went to the Mets, went back to his old motion, and wound up in a surgical theater.
Whoa, that's very interesting. Yeah, and it ain't that easy. Like, he's had several setbacks coming back. It's taken him like 2.5, 3 years to come back from this. So not every player. And John DeQuisto said something to me that's very interesting. The former Major League.
And let me tell you something. If Johnny D tells you something about pitching mechanics, take it to the bank. I don't know anybody in the game
I
who
will.
knows more about it
He told
than
me
Johnny
this.
D.
He told me that the problem with Tommy John surgery is that they have a template for recovery where they put everybody that has it through the exact same paces as if their bodies are going to respond identically, so that exercises are not flexible. They just set it up a one-time setup for everybody. And as he says, just as there are no pitching deliveries that are identical, there are no recovery times and that are identical. People are human beings. They're not machines. You can't go in there with a screwdriver and a manual because everybody's different. And he seems to think that's one of the biggest problem is that there's no real sense of individuality in the rehab programs. So,
well, there's a couple of things that I would suggest here, and I've had this very conversation with Johnny D multiple times. First of all, if you think about it, we all know about Dr. Yoakum, and we all know about Dr. Kurlan, and we all know about Dr. Elatrash. We know the guys who do the surgery, who take the broken part and repair it. But none of those clinics has an integrated rehabilitation center with them. And if you think about it, when you're dealing with, let's just suggest that you're the New York Mets and you own Matt Harvey. Mm-hmm. And you're dealing with that, and Dr. Elatrash says, sorry guys, but Matt's popped his patellar tendon, and we need to do Tommy John surgery on him. Okay, what's the first thing that you're going to say as the Mets? Get him back as fast as you can. We're paying him $12 million not to pitch this year. We can't afford to pay him $12 million not to pitch next year also, and still not know if he's coming back the year after that. So hurry every chance you get, which is the wrong thing to tell an athlete. So now you've got your rehabilitation is being supervised by who? Oh, your employer.
Right.
There's no conflict of interest there, is there?
None whatsoever. Where's that?
None. And couple that with the fact that unless you do it in a clinical setting where you can set up some controls and do some experimenting so that you can identify best practices, what you're left with is, it's like as a management consultant, I always used to tell people you should cherish your failures because they're your only chance to learn. If you succeed right out of the box, you don't know why, and you don't know how to replicate it because you succeeded as a happenstance. You succeeded out of good fortune, and and I don't know how to replicate good fortune. So the same thing with this. Unless you find some guys who are willing to take the chance that you may lose a year of your pitching career rather than gain a year by virtue of the fact that we did some experiments here and we discovered a series of things that we should not do in your rehab or that will decelerate your rehab. Until we learn those things, we don't know what they are. For all we know, page 3 of the standard Xerox protocol for coming back from Tommy John surgery may be completely filled with junk.
Right.
We just don't know.
Right. Or junk for one person. One person's junk is another person's, lunch. That kind of thing. Could be good for one person and not another. And then there's the question of pain threshold. how much of that affects rehab. And then there's the agent getting involved. You mentioned Harvey, and I remember Boros with the Mets being a go-between the doctor, the pitcher, the team, and the agent, all getting together to determine whether or not this guy should pitch. And the idea of pitch counts, we don't know if they're effective, because you mentioned these guys that Nolan Ryan, did he build up his arm strength by pitching all those innings, enabling him to pitch more innings, or are these and conversely, are these pitchers of today coddled by the pitch count and unable to build up the arm strength? So,
well, I can only go back to my childhood and tell you that when we were kids, we played ball every day, and our arms didn't hurt. We pitched every day, and our arms didn't hurt. We played burnout, and our arms didn't hurt. We played long toss, and our arms didn't hurt. We didn't throw curveballs. We didn't throw sliders. We didn't throw screwballs. We didn't throw split finger pitches. So, I don't know. Draw your own confusions.
Your own confusions. What do you like? I assume you mentioned 1960. You have a young voice, and we never talked about. How old are you, may I ask?
I will be 66 in August.
Oh, got you beat by a few.
So you're right. I am a young man.
You are. Indeed, we're all young. It's a different, our grandfathers' worlds were totally different in terms of quality of life. We were blessed by not having to tear down our bodies, I guess, or whatever it is that got us to this point. But by comparison to me, you are a young man. You've seen a lot. Changes in baseball have occurred over the years, DH, artificial grass, this, that, and the other thing. And you hit on something earlier, is comparing eras. People bitching about steroidal performances and what have you. I've come to believe that one can only compare players playing against each other in the era that they play against each other. It's impossible for me to tell you whether or not Barry Bonds was a better player than Ty Cobb, because they played against different people. They played against their different drugs of choice. In the 60s, it was a speed thing. Whether or not that helped reduce injuries, if you're going to use a drug, if you're going to use a performance enhancer, and you're building up bulk, and your tendons and your ligaments can't handle the bulk, well, you're going to break down. So, but overall, the changes in baseball, are they for the good or the bad? Which ones are you happy with, and which ones are you sad that baseball has taken the course?
Well, we can go historically, I guess. We'll start with I'm not a fan of the DH. And I think that now that people play beyond age 35, the primary reason for the institution of the DH has gone away. We no longer need to worry about hanging on to our heroes for an extra 2 or 3 years when they're too decrepit to put a glove on. And in fact, we've had career DHs. David Ortiz certainly feels like a career DH. Edgar Martinez was a career DH who, in my opinion, absolutely, positively belongs in the Hall of Fame. No question about it. Should have been a first ballot.
Even though you're
guy.
against the idea of a
I'm
DH.
against the DH, but you know what? It's a rule, and he didn't pass it. He didn't institute it. He didn't suggest it. He just performed it better than anyone else. And isn't that the definition of a Hall of Fame member? Someone who performs better than anyone else.
Right. Yeah.
Which leads to an interesting question about Pete Rose or Barry Bonds, or you can go on from there. But we're talking about historical changes. I am not a fan of baseball's effort to take away self-policing. I think that with my writing partner, Jason Turbo, we did a book on the unwritten rules, and so obviously I have a vested interest a little bit in that area. I'm not going to, pretend that I don't, but I think baseball was better. I think the outcomes were better when you could have guys like Bob Gibson or Don Drysdale who made it perfectly clear to you, or Stan Williams, who made it perfectly clear to you that if you acted in a manner that was disrespectful of your opponents or of the game, that those actions would have consequences, and the consequences were immediate and scary.
And that they owned the inside of the plate, too, and that they were permitted to own the inside of the plate at that time.
Well, they were permitted to. In Gibson's case, Gibson owned the outside of the plate. Gibson told hitters, most famously when his best friend, Bill White, got traded away from the Cardinals to the Phillies, Gibby told him, don't be leaning out and going after the slider off the plate. So in his first game against Gibson, what does White do? He hits the first two sliders he sees. He dives out over the plate and flicks them to right field. Third at bat was a pitch in his ear hole. And that's Gibson's best friend.
In his old teammates' ear hole, too. Hey, can I tell you a quick Bill White story? Because it goes back to what you mentioned when the Giants were close to moving to Tampa Bay. They were, as you said, all but gone. And the reason they didn't move was that said Bill White, who was at the time the president of the National League, had a long memory about St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay, and how when he and the Cardinals trained in St. Pete at Al Lang Field, which they shared with the Yankees in the 60s. And the prejudice of St. Petersburg was incredible. Players could not, and this is in the 60s. This isn't in the 40s. This is 20 years after almost 20 years after Jackie Robinson, which is 70 years too late. In the first place, they couldn't stay at the hotel. They had Gussie Bush had to buy the frickin' hotel. They'd farm the blacks, Kurt Flood, Gibson, Lou Brock, Bill White. What are we talking about? We're talking about the heart of anybody's batting order, and they had to go stay, and they were happy to do so because they were treated like humans. Families would take them in on the other side of the tracks. They couldn't stay at the team hotel. It stuck in Bill White's mind about the people there 40 years after that. And Bill White was started out as a New York Giant. He went into the service making way for Cepeda. He was coming up in the farm system and came up when they were still in New York. And he came up when they were still in New York. But he put the kibosh on that deal. He said, over my dead body. And that enabled the Giants to, I think it was Bud Herseth came in with Laurie, to help Lori.
No, that was a time before. That was a time before. This was the McGowan group that came in '93. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to pull a Paul Harvey on you and tell you the rest of the story.
Please.
Because there is even more to the story than you think.
Okay.
Who was Bill White's executive assistant at that time?
Who was he? I don't know.
Who was Bill White's executive assistant at that time?
I don't know.
Katie Feeney.
Bill White's executive assistant.
And what's Katie Feeney's background?
Chubb Feeney's daughter. It's Katie Feeney.
And Horace Stonham's granddaughter.
Yes.
And a San Francisco native and a Cal graduate.
Just passed away.
And let me tell you.
May she rest in peace.
Yes, I know. I just attended her memorial service at AT&T Park last week. Katie was a dear friend and is deeply missed. But Katie was the power behind the throne. And
are you still here? Well, your battery went out again. I'm going to fill time by just, should I sing? Should I sing My Fair Lady songs? Let a woman in your life. What can I don't know how to fill this. He went out. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to push a button and put us on break. And when Michael Duca rejoins us, we'll continue the interview. So you're listening to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I am Ralph Tyko, and it's a little break time. I'm going to push a button. Here we go. We're back. Technical difficulties solved. Michael Duca's the guest. I'm Ralph Tyko. It is flying high over the zone, Alameda, California. Michael, you are in Northern California. Do you have experiences in Alameda? Do you know anybody? Have you seen our little paradise?
Well, I think the best way to answer that, Ralph, is to tell you that in the late 1980s, I was named the City of Alameda's Volunteer of the Year.
Oh, wow. So you lived in Alameda.
I lived
Nice.
in the island city for almost 30 years. And in fact, I'm gonna hit you with a little piece of trivia. Did you know that the first professional baseball game played in California was in Alameda?
Really?
It was right behind Kroll's.
Down by where the beach, Neptune Beach, was. Am I correct?
Yes, exactly. And the home plate umpire for that game, and I'm going to get this wrong because I always get these guys confused. I believe the home plate umpire for that game was James Jeffries. It was whoever the reigning heavyweight champion of the world was at the time. There were more than 2,000 people sitting in trees to see that game.
Whoa. Now, was it played at Washington Park at that beautiful?
I'm not aware that Washington Park was Washington Park then. This was before the turn of the century.
Okay.
The prior century.
We have a rich sports baseball history in Alameda.
Sports in general. The first prize fight in California was in Alameda also.
Didn't know that. Wow. Alameda, in its heyday, was a vacation resort like for the San Francisco, which is a much colder climate. You come over the East Bay, It's like 15 minutes. You're over the bridge, and the weather changes can go up 15 degrees. And we have water. We're surrounded by water. It's a man-made estuary. It's a wonderful town. Politically, it lacks a little bit in terms of progression. Always has, probably always will. It's a military town. There was a big Navy base out on what they call now Alameda Point, and the base was just turned over, toxic waste included, to Alameda itself, and they're going through the premise that they're cleaning up all the toxic waste, which engineers will tell you cannot be cleaned up in total because the tides shift. But it is an extremely lucrative city at this point because of all of the acreage that the city has been bequeathed. And
indeed, and you'll be.
How long ago did you live here, Michael?
I've been gone. Well, I'm pretty far gone, but I've been gone for about 8 years now.
Okay, drastic change. Rents incredible. Again, in those 8 years, the base and the planning and the congestion and the cars and all that. It's changing.
And see, I had this brilliant and progressive idea for how to deal with the problems out on Alameda Point, which absolutely nobody thought was a good idea.
Put a bridge somewhere
No, I thought that they should, out on the point, where it's surrounded on 3 sides by water, I thought they should build one of the several prisons that have been voted for and tax dollars committed to, but that nobody wants in their neighborhood. You put it out there where you've got miles of open land surrounding it. You reduce the possibilities of any kind of escape. And what you do is you give it a 25 or a 50-year lease on that land, and everybody who is incarcerated there learns a trade. And the trade they learn is toxic waste removal. Because the real secret to keeping people out of jail is for them to have good jobs when they get out of jail. Well, there's no shortage of need for hazmat technicians, and they make $80,000 to $100,000 a year. So, train them.
Whoa!
And in the process, get yourself.
I'm talking to Buckmaster Fuller here. You're a futurist. You looking at things. You got a great brain. How'd you get into baseball? How'd you get into your passion of baseball? Did you become a journalist first, or a baseball person to become? Did you have the passion?
Well, baseball was always in my blood, and when I was in college, I wanted to transfer to a school where I could get a radio and TV degree and try to go into broadcasting. But I was somewhat financially dependent on my family at the time, and they said, no, that's a waste of your talent. Don't do anything silly like that. So I wound up instead, yes, I wrote, my first byline was when I was a sophomore in high school in the LA Times, and I covered high school sports for a few years. I was the first person in the county of Los Angeles to be certified as a high school basketball referee while still a high school student.
Whoa! Whoa, indeed.
And better than that, I learned my trade from someone who knew it pretty well, a fellow by the name of Doug Harvey.
Yes. What did he call himself in the book? God? They call me God.
They called me God, yes. And
what kind of a person was he?
Oh, Doug is delightful. He is being ravaged by Alzheimer's at this point in his life, which is a shame to have lost all of that brilliance of, I don't know anybody who knew the rule book better than Doug. Most umpires, I'm going to tell you right now, most umpires are guys you would enjoy spending time with. I go to the ballpark 6 days a week, and 5 of those days I sit with Eddie Montague, and we talk about anything and everything. Not always baseball, but if it's baseball, it's always umpiring. He knows that I understand how important mechanics are, that they're more important than the rules. You can't apply the rules if you can't see the play. And, we get along great.
Your legs is just like in anything else. You have to put your legs in position, to your body in position, and that involves footwork. So just like any other skill, I'm sure footwork comes into it. That's very
footwork and instinct. Instinct is very important. There's a play, I was not out the umpire involved, but in 2010, everybody remembers that the Giants won the World Series. Nobody remembers that the Giants almost didn't make the playoffs. They had to get a triple from Jonathan Sanchez against the Padres on the last day of the season to make the playoffs at all. The reason for that was that an umpire with horrible mechanics cost them a game in July against the New York Mets that should not have been, that should not have been a loss. Travis Ishikawa was called out at the plate when he was, he has yet to be tagged. He has yet to be tagged.
And there was no instant replay at that time.
There was no instant replay at that time, and what happened was that there was a runner on third, contact play was on, the ball was hit sharply to David Wright at third base. So the play's coming home because it's the winning run in the ninth inning. So as an umpire, you have a specific mechanic. You're supposed to swing over towards the first base on deck circle so that the play is coming directly at you straight down the line. This umpire made the wrong choice. He moved to the other on-deck circle and then had to try and turn his head and track the ball. Now,
while
I
he
know
was
enough
moving.
about, even if he wasn't moving, it wouldn't matter. This is also true of hitters. You see a hitter who tells you that they track the ball all the way into the catcher's glove, they're lying. It can't be done. Human eyes cannot resolve motion and track a baseball thrown at that angle once the ball is about 16 feet away. It disappears. Hitters hit where they think the ball is going to be. And
so for Ted Williams, for instance, it disappears. He was reputed to have 20/10 vision. It would disappear twice, later. That's what made him a great hitter. He would ascertain.
Actually, it was the fact that Ted had a brain that was built to do geometry. The ball disappears at the same point no matter how acute your vision is, because it's not the fact that you can't focus. It's the fact that your eye muscles can't move fast enough.
Okay.
You can't track the ball because when it leaves the pitcher's hand, it's coming towards you. And then at a certain point, it is more going past you than towards you. And at the point where it is only going past you, you don't see it because you cannot track at that speed. If a ball's going 80 miles an hour when it passes you, which is about how fast it is if a pitcher throws a pitch that's 90 when he releases it, it loses about 8 to 9 miles an hour on the way to the plate. So if it's going 80 miles an hour when it goes by you, it's going about 90 feet a second.
Right.
Eyes don't move that fast.
The swing has to be where you think the ball's going to be. And that's
you have to predict its trajectory.
Right. And that involves more than just the speed. Well, more than just the trajectory. it involves the speed of the ball. So you have to pick up at the same time whether or not the ball is going to be a curveball, a breaking ball, screwball, this, that, and the other thing.
And all of that includes the ability to time the trigger point on your swing, and all of that goes back to muscle memory, which is why you see pitchers like Javier Lopez have the kind of success that they do, because hitters simply don't face that release point very often. So it's not ingrained in them to be able to pick up the spin and know what that means in an instant. It's why you see Barry Bonds unable to hit off Jenny Finch, because baseball players are not used to a release point at the knees. They're not used to a ball going up.
Right.
Softball does both of those. So there's simply, it's not that they're not good enough. It's not that they're not fast enough to hit that pitch. It's that their brains are not trained.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Well, that explains the king in his court to us.
It sure does. It sure does.
Hey, Michael, this has been terrific. I hope you enjoyed it a third of as much as I enjoyed it, and then I'll be a happy guy. And
well, you can be a happy guy then.
Good. And I hope you'll come back and we can continue this. It's something that we can branch out. We could talk like this for hours and hours. Two things that I'm stuck with from this is that I didn't know Doug Harvey was ill. I'm heartbroken about that. He, a true baseball man. And I'm stuck with the fact that the way you put it, Katie Feeney, whose dad was a terrific general manager with the Giants, built that team, helped build that team, and they had quite a combination. They had Carl Hubble as board of directors, so to speak, in determining player moves. People like Charlie Fox, Hank Sauer there, and at the head of it was Chub Feeney, and he built a contender, those early San Francisco Giant teams that competed with the Dodgers and the Cardinals and what have you. That was some great baseball. And you tell me, and I'm just learning it, that she basically ran the show. I forgot that she was his assistant. She did scheduling. I remember that. But I didn't realize that she ran the show as much as seems logical. It's a woman who grew up, like you say, Stonem's granddaughter. She was spoon-fed baseball with her pablum. Tell me something about her from a personal level. You say she was a close friend.
Katie spent 30 years of her life learning and performing tap dancing. That's a piece of her that almost nobody outside of baseball, and a lot of people inside of baseball, didn't know. She and Phyllis Marriage, who was her counterpart with the American League, they took tap lessons together, and they were both in the same group that performed. Katie was a trained social worker. She got a degree in social work from Cal, and throughout life, while baseball was her life, helping others was her passion. Katie lived in Manhattan, worked on Park Avenue, got up at 4 o'clock every morning to go down to help prepare breakfast for homeless people.
Wow. Wow. What can you say? That's quite a loss to not only baseball but humanity.
Yeah, it's definitely a loss for all of us, and one that I have to say was really acutely felt. Katie passed away on April Fool's Day. She passed away the day before her birthday. She passed away the day before opening day. It was going to be the first baseball season in 40 years without Katie Feeney as a member of Major League Baseball's front office, and it didn't come to pass. We lost her that night.
Sorry.
It's a personal loss for me because I was really looking forward. I knew in retirement Katie would spend more and more time back here in San Francisco with her brothers and her sister, and would spend lots of time at AT&T Park when she could finally openly root for her Giants. I'll leave you with one quick story, Ralph. One quick story. As I mentioned to you off air, my wife is manager of guest services for the Giants, and as such, when the Giants win a World Series, she gets a ring. I get the opportunity to have one also, which is wonderful and spectacular. And then you start thinking about, well, wait a minute, you work for MLB.com and you're an official scorer, and you can't
no rooting in the press box, isn't that the
no rooting in the press box? So I asked Katie in spring training. I said, I know that there's a general edict that says that you can't wear any clothing in the press box or on the field that contains the logo of a Major League Baseball club. And I showed her my ring, and I said, the ring has the Giants logo on the front, but it's not really clothing. So what's the deal on this? And she looked at me and she said, I can't wear that anywhere. You can't wear that when you're scoring. But the rest of the time, if you don't want to wear it for yourself, wear it for me.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a beautiful story. That really brings tears to my eyes. Wear it for me.
And I do.
Yeah. I have a replica ring of the 1954 World Series that, when they were in New York, that the San Francisco Giants handed out on a promotion a few years ago. And I treasure it so and wonder why the Giants of San Francisco honor the New York Giants more than they're honored in New York ballparks. But that's another thing.
Well, I don't think anybody does history better than the Giants. The Yankees have their old timers games, and I am strong supporter of that, and I think that that's also a wonderful way to deal with your history. But the Giants honor teams. They honor individuals. They bring people back into the organization as much as they can. I think far better than any other organization I can think of in sports in general.
Let me give you something that will modify that. The best time I ever had at a baseball game was in, I guess it must have been 1989, when Al Rosen, who was then the general manager, put together an old-timers day between the New York Giants, obviously who were still alive in 1954, and the Cleveland Indians. and he brought back the guys like Dave Pope, wearing white shoes that day, I remember.
Yep.
And things like that stick in my mind, and I can't find my keys.
Yeah.
It was just incredible, but what I remember, Willie and Al Rosen both came out of the clubhouse with 2 or 3 bats. I think it was 3 bats, and just walking up, and they were no spring chickens at that time, and they both had strokes, batting strokes, and as if obviously they couldn't hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, but they had the same technique as they had. It was great to see those guys in uniform. And you mentioned the Yankees. When I was a kid growing up, old timers, the guys that they bring back, it was unbelievable. And if you ever want to see a Yankee production of bringing back people, it's on YouTube. The Mickey Mantle retirement, when they retired as a plaque, and they gave him a plaque in the center field. The guys that came back to honor him, this was in '64 when he was retiring. It was unreal. I get goosebumps, and the cheers for him. It's like 12 minutes of bedlam. They could not stop the crowd that time. Getting off the subject, I'll ask you this: Mickey or Willie?
Willie.
Okay, I agree.
And here's the reason. You can only judge players by what they did. And one of the first things that Mickey did was step on a sprinkler head.
Trying to catch a ball hit by Willie Mays in the World Series in 1951. DiMaggio called him off at the last minute. He pulled up. He hit that sprinkler, and imagine what he would have been. But yes, as you say, Willie did it. He had the good fortune to remain relatively healthy.
And he was also, to be honest, he was also a better all-round athlete. To be Willie Mays, to be an all-state quarterback in high school in Alabama, being black in 1946 is quite an accomplishment.
Oh.
To be all-state in basketball while black in Alabama in 1946 is quite an accomplishment. And he was both of those things in addition to being Kitty Cat's boy and one of the greatest 15 and 16-year-olds playing in the Negro Leagues at the time.
Right. Hey, can we use as a bibliography to all of that the book by Charles Einstein's Willie's Time?
Absolutely.
Was that a chronicle of the man's life, and that brought in what you mentioned? Katie Feeney majored in sociology. I think that book should be a textbook in every school, a history book, a textbook, whatever, in every school. It just went through everything. His times, the idea of being a black person, he talked about the Giants being in Las Vegas and how they're playing slot machines, and Willie is like 20, and they come up to him and they say, "You can't be here." And Monty Irvin had to walk him out. You cannot be here. You could be an Army veteran. You can't sit at Woolworth's when you go back. Your aunt works there. and you come back from the Army, Willie, you're back. And she says, she's working at Woolworths as a waitress, and she says, Willie, welcome back. I'm so shocked to see you here. Thank God you're here, but can't have you here. You can't sit at this counter. I know you're an Army vet. I know you're World Series champion, this, that, and the other thing. You can't sit at this counter. What a world we live in, Michael Duca.
Well, and the last piece of trivia on your way out the door. Who signed Willie Mays to his first professional contract?
That famous scout who's actually signed him to the contract.
Yes, and it was a scout. Yes, it was a scout.
Okay, the name of this all-time great scout escapes me.
Eddie Montague Sr.
Wow.
The great umpire's father signed Willie Mays.
Wow. That's pretty. Now that's a baseball. That's a baseball life. Whoa. When I said that great baseball scout, I wasn't thinking. I was thinking of the scout that signed Mantle, whose name escapes me. So I just learned something. Wow, he was a baseball scout. One of my favorite human beings, as we continue this, because there really is no ending.
When this battery runs out, there is. I don't have another.
Okay. This time there is. But I'll ask you the one. Anything you can have. I interviewed Charlie Fox in 1995 in a series I did with Leonard Cobbett came in, Hank Sauer, folks.
Did you get Charlie to sing for you?
I did not. I'm sorry for that. But speaking of World Series rings, he wore that original fit. They gave him. He wasn't a part of that team, but he was scouting or minor league manager, and he had a World Series ring. I got Hank Sauer to tell me stories, and I just found the last. It was in 2 parts, and the second part had been missing from my life for a long time, and I've got to get it. Got to put on a DVD about Hank Sauer's experiences with the Giants in the final year and what have you. But I guess my point is that Charlie Fox gave me like an hour on camera, sitting there telling me stories about when he was 20, a native New Yorker, got to be a catcher with his home team. Came up, batted .400, was 2 for 5, and caught the likes of Carl Hubble and Dummy Hoy, I think it was, and what was Charlie Fox like as an acquaintance?
Well, had I made Charlie's acquaintance, I could answer that for you, but I never was that fortunate.
Oh, okay. Then I thought...
I can tell you about Al Rosen, but I can't tell you about Charlie.
Well, then tell me something about Al Rosen, and I'll let you go.
Al Rosen and I, on a plane flight, once spent 25 minutes arguing over the perfection of 90 feet between the bases and whether or not the proliferation of larger gloves was ruining the defensive balance of the game.
Okay.
That was the level at which Al was involved. Even by the time he became a general manager, he still looked at baseball on a theoretical level. He still looked at ways to improve the game over when he played it, which is a pretty difficult thing to do because he played it about as well as it can be played. And he was a highly, highly opinionated person. And when that conversation was over on the airplane, I left and went back to my own seat. I had half a dozen members of that year's Giants team come up to me and say, "How did you ever disagree with Al and survive?"
That's a lot to know about Al Rosen. Appreciate that. He didn't take to disagreeing much, did he? To people.
You had to have your facts at hand if you were going to disagree with him. And it happened to be somehow that we stumbled into a rare topic where I could hold my own with him, and we not only agreed to disagree, but we remained friends for a very, very long time. I last saw Al about a year before he passed. He bought me breakfast at his country club in Palm Springs. And he's a delightful, delightful man.
You know, as I think of it, I'm a Jew boy, and you know what Al Rosen meant to we Jews, and I was also the tops rep in going around to minor league teams in the Northwest League and the Cal League in the years, in the 80s and 90s, in the years when he was there. And there were times when he was at a game, either up in Oregon or San Jose, where we'd be in the same ball club, the same ballpark, and I never had the guts to go up to him and chat. I was so intimidated by his presence that I couldn't go up and go, "Hi, my name is Ralph, and I remember." I just couldn't do that. I've met hundreds of managers, coaches when I was a kid, playing, doing that gig, and I would never had any. I could talk to anybody. I could talk to you. I could ask you if you'd be on my show. That's a little bit of guts on my part. Couldn't go up to Al Rosen, I'm sorry. It's my loss. No guts, no glory.
Well, this is true. I'm gonna send you away once and for all with some advice that I got from my voice teacher. When I became an official scorer, I figured, well, about 90% of your job is informing the people in the press box of what they just missed. And the best way to do that is to learn how to properly use a microphone, because I'd been in press boxes many years and listened to way too many PR directors who swallowed the microphone and you couldn't understand a word they were saying. Right. So in the course of taking lessons on how to properly use a voice and on how to use it as an instrument and how to use a microphone, I would go out on occasional auditions for voiceover work. And she asked me one day, "What's your attitude towards auditions?" And I said, "Well, it's the same as everybody else's. They're terrifying." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because, studies have 11 seconds to make an impression. And that's it. So you've got to be, you got to be on the instant the door opens." And she looked at me and she said, "You're going about it the wrong way. Here's what you have to think of when you walk in the door for an audition." And if you think about this for a minute, you'll see that it applies to absolutely everything in life. You already don't have the gig. You cannot screw up and lose it.
Right.
You can only go in, be your authentic self, and if that's what people want, then you have no problem filling that role. And if it's not what people want, you'll never be able to fill the role you don't want to. So you already don't have the date. You already don't know Al Rosen. What's the worst that can happen? He blows you off.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't want to talk to you. He wouldn't have said that, and I know no human being would go, no, just dismiss me. He'd say, nice to meet you. I can't talk right now, or this, and that would have been it. I just...
well, and you walk up to him and you tell him, as a Jewish kid growing up in New York in the 40s and 50s, it was great to have a role model from my own faith. Nobody shuts down that conversation. Nobody.
No, absolutely not. Well, that's one was saying. You mentioned something. Be genuine. If you do it and you be genuine. I tried out, as did Sherry Davis, who you may know.
I do.
I turned out to be my good friend later in life. But 25 years before, we both tried out for that job that she got and I didn't. And it was an audition for the public address announcer. I wanted to be a public address announcer, so did she. She got the job. We became friends. She's been on the show several times. We're buddies. Years later. But you rang a bell in my head. I just thought of it. I went on. They gave everybody the microphone, and they said, do it. And I tried to be the voice of the Yankees, Bob Shepard.
Oh, what a delightful guy he was. But go ahead.
Oh, if you can tell me something about him, St. John's University, a speech major, the voice of the Yankees now batting number 7, Mickey Mantle, number 7. So I tried to do that. I did some sort of half concoction of that. I wouldn't have gotten the job anyway, but I wasn't genuine. I wasn't Bob Shepard. I shouldn't have tried to imitate him in any way, his pace, whatever I did. Got a few write-ups in the paper. I got off. People interviewed me. Bob Badecki, I remember, wrote a little article. It was the best, a great experience just trying. Because as you say, I didn't have that skill of thinking, I don't have the job anyway. Just be myself, be genuine. I didn't have that in the back of my head. I had the idea, well, I'm going to sound like somebody, and that was wrong. But I'm happy. I'm still, to this day, happy for Sherry. She was the first female to become a public address announcer.
And is enshrined in Cooperstown because of it.
Right, absolutely. And, and she's a genuinely good person. She's
Catholic. I know.
Both a small C and a large C.
And even just the first part of that word. The cat part.
Catholic.
No, the cat part of Catholic.
Yes. Very good point. Hey, Michael, I hope you'll come back.
Ladies and gentlemen. Jeffrey Bonds.
Yeah, I'll take
you. Then you'd have gotten the job.
That's right. They say, they had a script for you, something about Dusty Baker was managing, and there was some sort of thing that they wanted you to get in, or I don't remember what it was. But hey, listen, the word not having a job is not a bad way to go through life. Jobs are sometimes overrated. That wasn't a job. That was where it was like the Tops gig, where they're paying you to do something that you love to do. It isn't really a job. So from that standpoint, I'll always be sad that I didn't get it, but I'll always be happy for Sherry Davis, and I'm happy that you joined me today. We've taken up the better part of 2 hours, and we are just skimming things we could be talking about. And when you come back, we'll talk about something non-baseball next time. We'll talk about the
times
we live in. Promise?
Promise.
Good deal, Michael Duca. Thank you very much. I'm going to end the show the way I do all the shows that I end that are just mine, not on the network. I don't want to do this for the other hosts, but I'm the host this time. I will tell you to keep your dreams wet, and I'll tell the audience the same thing. You and the audience, keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your kids out of military recruiting stations, and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. And if you do all four things, it'll improve your lives incredibly. Just don't have to do any of them if you don't want. It's an optional thing. But have a good day anyway, and thank you, Michael. We'll talk soon.
The pleasure was mine, Ralph. Thank you.
All right, sir. Be well. Everybody out there, back next time. Adios.